Do you want to be able to hit with topspin on your forehand or your backhand ground strokes? Or maybe you already have some spin, but you want to increase it and hit with that heavy topspin, kind of like Nadal? Well, if that's you, you've clicked on the right video, and in just a few moments I'll show you a few simple tricks that will help you to produce more spin on your forehand, on your two-handed backhand, and on your one-handed backhand. Now firstly, why do we want to produce topspin when we're playing tennis? Now if we think about the two main obstacles, the first one of course is clearing the net. Now the second obstacle is keeping the ball in court. So in order to eliminate both of those obstacles, clearing the net and getting the ball to dip before the lines, topspin is the magic ingredient. Now before we get any deeper into the video, if you're serious about improving your game, then make sure you have subscribed to the channel and you turn on the notification bell. Now we can lift that ball. I can lift this ball by opening my strings or by pushing the bottom of the ball, so bunting the ball, and that will help me to lift the ball over the net. But once I increase the power, once I increase the racket head speed, that ball sails long, and if I go even faster, I end up hitting the back fence. So if we think about a player like Nadal, who plays with a lot of margin, he's lifting the ball quite high over the net. And on clay, we can see that Nadal sometimes lifts the ball with an extra 2 or 3 net levels. Now this is eliminating the net, so he wants to take the net out of play, and by lifting the ball that high over the net, it makes it certain that the net is no longer an obstacle. So the key ingredient in lifting that ball and then making it dip is that topspin. So there I've hit with a good 2 net levels, so the net level plus another one, and you can see the ball dipping before the lines. So I'm eliminating the lines along with the net, and this is only possible if we produce that topspin. So once again, flat, I'm clearing the net, but the ball sails long. Spin, I'm clearing the net, but the ball dips in. So the first and main reason we want to produce that topspin is to make us more consistent players. We can clear the net with a good margin and we can get the ball to dip in. So we'll increase our consistency right away. But there are two main other reasons that we really want to produce that topspin, especially as we progress. Now the more spin I hit with, the more power I can hit with and still keep that ball in the court. If I go for a powerful forehand but it's very flat, I may get some in, but I'll miss a lot as well, especially under the pressure of a match. But by increasing my topspin now, keeping that same racket head speed, keeping that same power, I can start to be much more consistent with a very fast racket. So I feel like I can hit those balls as hard as I want to, but the ball stays in the court because of the margin over the net and because I have a lot of spin to make that ball dip in. So I can be very aggressive with my racket all the way through that contact point. I don't have to slow down, whereas the players who hit very flat, when they get in the tight moments in a match, you'll see that they start to slow down the racket and start guiding that ball. Another major reason you want to produce that topspin is when you're hitting the ball flat, unless you're going for a winner. So there's a time and a place to hit the ball flat, but it's the right time and you have to choose the right ball. If you're just hitting the ball flat and kind of pushing the ball, guiding the ball, it becomes a very easy shot for this player down there to deal with. The ball starts to sit up right into most players' strike zone. So for most players, they like to hit the ball around waist height. And by hitting the ball flat, the ball will then sit up to around that height and make it very easy for the opponents to attack you. But when you increase the topspin and you lift that ball with more net clearance, all of a sudden when the ball bounces on the opponent's side, instead of just bouncing and sitting up in their strike zone, the ball should bounce and travel way past that strike zone up to around shoulder or even head height if you hit it very aggressively. So by increasing my spin, by increasing my net clearance, I can now hit that ball with a lot of power and force that player to now be pushed back way behind the baseline to end up dealing with these high balls. This is exactly the same method that Nadal uses against most of his opponents when he's playing on clay and on hard courts. He's pushing the player back with that heavy spin. He's forcing them further and further behind the baseline. He can then start to dictate play, because remember, the more spin you have, the faster the ball kicks off the court. The spin will bounce, especially on those clay courts or on those hard courts. The ball will bounce and kick up aggressively. So the more power we have along with that spin, the faster that ball will kick off, and the more aggressive it will kick off, and it will really force that player to travel back to deal with those high balls. So now that we know the importance of producing topspin, how exactly is it created? Now the first and the main method to actually producing that spin is to have a low to high swing path during your strike zone. So if we imagine this ball as a clock, we have 12 o'clock on the top and 6 o'clock at the bottom. When I want to produce that heavy topspin, my main focus is to get the racket head under that ball level. So if you're making contact here, your racket needs to be around this position. If you're making contact here, your racket is below that ball. If you're making contact very low, you're still below that height of the contact point. So you're always having the racket head below the point of contact. This will ensure that when you're hitting the ball, you can really focus on brushing up the back of the ball, going from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Easiest way for you to instantly improve that topspin and see that increased net clearance. 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock, I can straight away lift that ball over the net and produce that spin. So a low to high swing path is crucial in producing that spin. But there's also another way for you to increase your spin instantly, and this is by adjusting the angle of the strings. The side of the strings I'm going to make contact with, I start to close it prior to contact. So my strings in this position are slightly close to the ground. I can even close them all the way if I want to produce a really heavy topspin shot. And from this position now, if I simply hit the ball and roll the racket on top of the strings, I'll produce that spin, but look at what happens. So I'm producing topspin, I'm producing a lot of spin, but the ball ends up going into the ground because of my racket path and because I'm hitting the top of the ball. So it doesn't work unless you change something, and the change happens with that low to high swing. So if I close my strings, but I also have that low to high swing, now instead of hitting through the court this way, I'm hitting from low to high with that slightly closed angle. And the more spin you want, the more you can close your strings in that back position or that racket drop position. And this is what we see Federer doing, Nadal doing. When they want more spin, you'll see them in the power position, and then they'll drop the racket and the strings will be facing the court. Here's a very simple trick for you to feel that change in the angle of the strings and what it actually helps you to do with that ball. So a flatter shot, my strings are facing the right side of the court in this position, and you'll see the ball flight. Quite flat. I'm still producing that brush, but it's quite a flat brush. Then I start to close the strings and you'll see a massive difference. So once again, the flat shot and the spin. So by changing the angle of my strings prior to contact and during that contact zone, I can produce that heavier topspin shot if I'm going from low to high. So on the one-handed backhand, this low to high swing path is exactly the same. You want to feel that you're getting under the ball level, under that contact point with your racket head, and then as you're making contact, you're brushing the back of the ball once again from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock. For the two-handed backhand, it's exactly the same method. we want to feel that the top hand, so my left hand if I'm a right-handed player, is really dropping below that contact point, and as I'm hitting that ball, I'm using that top hand to brush up the back of the ball. Now along with that, you could also manipulate the strings, and this is something that Nadal does. So when he's reaching that back position and he starts the racket drop, we'll often see Nadal's strings, the side that he's going to make contact with, facing the ground. So that was the flatter shot, and now I'll close the strings to the ground. Straight away you can see the difference in spin levels, you can hear the difference in that sound as I'm making contact. So that's a simple way for you to increase your spin on your two-handed backhand. With the one-hander, it's exactly the same thing. And if I close the strings, I can produce that heavier spin right away. Now another simple trick to help you produce more spin on your forehand or on your backhand is to use a circular loop. So when you're preparing, when you're taking the racket back, if I use a one line swing, so if I just go back and forward, I'm creating that linear swing, and it'll be very good for hitting flat, but it won't be so good for hitting that topspin. But if I use a circular loop, so I go up, down, and then back up, so you can see it's like a circle. So if I can time my strike zone, my contact point, when I'm going on that lift phase, so I've gone up, I've gone down, and if I can make contact around here, what's happening is my racket's traveling from low to high. So naturally, I've created that momentum to actually produce good racket head speed during that low to high swing. This is the same on your two-handed backhand. I can use that circular loop once again. Up, down, up. And with the one-hander, exactly the same. Up, down, up. So if you can use that circular loop and you can time the contact point when you're going upwards, then you'll have much more spin right away because you're using that low to high swing path. Now what happens is a lot of players use that loop and they still struggle to generate spin, often because they're making contact late. So if we think about the loop once again, once I take the racket up, once I start that drop, if I hit the ball somewhere around here, I'm starting to lift it, but it's at the very lowest position of that loop. And what happens is it's very hard to actually produce spin on the side of your body. So if you're someone who's struggling with spin, even though you're using a loop, you might be making contact on the side of your body, which is a very hard task to do. This could be the same on the two-handed backhand or the one-handed backhand. And that's exactly why we want to make contact out in front of our body on both the forehand and the backhand ground strokes. This is because we have that low to high swing, but it's much easier for me to produce that spin out in front of my body. So I'm brushing the ball, but in front of my body. So a linear swing, very good for producing that power and that flat shot, but it's not going to help me produce that spin. Now I'm going to use a loop and really focus on making contact when I'm lifting the racket from that low to high position. So the ball goes up, loop, and I brush. Now another trick to get more topspin during that strike zone is to use the windshield wiper motion. So the windshield wiper motion, when I'm making contact, my racket can be slightly on edge like this, especially if I've dropped it quite low. So prior to contact, I might get into this kind of position with my racket head tilted below the grip level. So I'm in that position here, and as I start to hit the ball, I can make contact around this position, and the tip of the racket now goes from that dropped position to the racket now pointing up to the sky. So the tip of the racket goes from low to high. and all I'm doing is turning the forearm. So without the racket, it will go from this supinated position at a point of contact. So now I'm in supination, and then as I make contact, it starts to pronate over. So exactly the same method that we use on the serve: supination, pronation, supination, pronation. The pronation is happening with the forearm, and it isn't happening so much with the wrist, although the wrist is involved, because the wrist will be in that locked back position on the forehand side into that neutral position as you get that windshield wiper motion. So this action can help me produce much more spin, because you can see it's traveling from low to high just with the forearm pronating during that strike zone. Now on the two-handed backhand, this would happen from your top hand. So your left hand would be in that position during the contact point, and then the left hand would be in that position. So the left hand is going from being below the right hand, so left hand below, left hand above, left hand below, left hand above. That same motion can be done on the one-handed backhand as well. I'm in that position now, I'm making contact, and notice the palm of my hand. It goes from facing the court to now facing the sky. So facing the ground, facing the sky. And all I'm doing, if I don't even move my arm here, I just now use my forearm to turn over. Palm is facing the ground, palm is facing the sky. Look at what happens with my racket head. Palm to the ground, palm to the sky. You can see that I'm now getting that low to high swing path just by using the forearm to turn over. So from that position, I'm making contact, palm opens up. Palm down, palm opens up. So I'm creating that low to high swing path on the forehand, two-handed backhand, and the one-handed backhand by using my forearm to supinate and to pronate. So straight away, if I use that motion, I produce much more spin on my forehand, and all I'm focusing on is supination, pronation. And on the two-handed backhand, the exact same thing, with the top hand leading that swing. So racket's down, racket up, and my top hand is doing the work for me. And with the one-handed backhand, now I'm focusing on palm facing the ground when I make contact, palm facing the sky on the finish. So palm down, palm up. Palm down, palm up. So anything that will help us to increase that low to high swing path will help us to generate more spin. So you can see the circular loop coming down and then coming up, or that low to high swing path in the first place, and then the windshield wiper motion. All three of those things help you to produce that low to high swing path. Now, another thing that will help you to produce that low to high swing path is using the legs, and ground force in particular. So a lot of players, they think I have to stay down when I'm hitting the shot. I have to stay loaded. I have to load up on my forehand. I have to load up on my backhand, but I have to stay low. Now this only happens if the ball is very low and you're trying to stay low with your balance because you're dealing with that very low ball. But on most shots, you'll see the pros, they'll load up and then they'll come up. They'll lift up into that shot, and often they'll jump into that shot. So by loading up, especially in the open stance, if we're taking the forehand to begin, if I load up in that open or semi-open stance, from that position, if I stay low, I can produce that low to high swing, but I'm losing out on that potential ground force into that shot. If I load up, however, and I drive up as I make contact, I'm now getting even more power in that low to high swing path, and this will only increase my spin. And this is the exact same method on my two-handed backhand. I can load up in this position even with the neutral stance, and as I hit the ball, I can lift up. So you don't want to lift up too early, because then the timing will be thrown off, but you're lifting up as you're making contact. So I'm down, I start to go towards contact, and I'll start to use that low to high swing along with my leg drive. So I'm getting down, and I'm coming up. Getting down, sitting down, and I'm coming up. And a very simple way for you to feel that is imagine you're sitting in a chair. So whenever you're setting up for your shot, you're sitting in a chair and you're lifting up, you're standing up. So I'm sitting in the chair, I'm standing up. I'm sitting in the chair, I'm standing up. So sitting down, standing up. And I can also use the legs on my one-handed backhand. So as I load up into that power position, I'll get down with my legs. I'll normally use the close stance on that backhand if I can, because I want to have that weight transfer from the back leg to the front leg. But as I get on that back leg, I'm loading up on it. I'm not standing up like a statue. I'm getting down, I'm sitting in the chair. As I make contact, I can lift up. So sitting down, lifting up. And if I can time that down and up action, this will help me to increase that low to high swing path and get more power on any particular stroke. So I'm going down, I'm coming up. Down, up. Down, up. So I'm exaggerating this knee bend now. And I drive up. Exaggerate. Drive up. Exaggerate. Drive up. And the faster I can use that leg loading and unloading, the more spin I can produce if I'm using the right swing. So I can be in that position, load, unload. So there you have it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned something new, and I hope the next time you're out there playing, you'll be playing with as much spin as Nadal. Now, if you have enjoyed this lesson, click on that like button, subscribe to the channel as well, and make sure you turn on that notification bell. Also, leave a comment down below. Is there any lessons you would like to see in the near future? Signing off, Simon from TTT. All the best, and see you soon, guys.